How are you all doing? I am putting this out a few days late because I had a week of decompression, which was so incredibly needed. My mom came to visit, so I had some support, was in a beautiful, quiet, peaceful place. And I just feel like my soul has landed back into my body. My nervous system has relaxed, and I feel like a different woman. Well, I feel more like myself. That's the truth. So I'm incredibly grateful for the last week to just come back. And just on a very quick note, I shared this on my Instagram yesterday. Environment matters. It really, really matters. You can have the most amazing practice, and be centered and meditative and all of these things. And if you're in an environment that really is abrasive and disharmonious, it's going to have an effect on your being. So I'm extraordinarily grateful to not be in the situation that I was in before, and now feeling much more grounded, rested, relaxed, and back to my being. So, yeah. So, today, what do I want to speak to? I have been feeling for a long time now, but it's coming in very strongly right now around simplicity. Simplicity, like just that we make things very complicated. And when life is actually really simple. And so, what I want to simplify today is our purpose, because there's a lot of pressure. And this is a topic that I'm revisiting. I've spoken to it in the past, but I want to speak to purpose, why we're here, what is the most important thing about this human experience that, if you've watched any near death experience videos, all of the ones that I've watched will say that in your life review, there's one thing that is literally the most important thing. So I want to speak to that. And we'll see where else it goes. But I think in this time of just chaos and crumbling, as I've been talking about, the simplification of why you're here, who you are, what matters, what has meaning. To me, this is where we should place our focus and attention, because it's also what's going to create the change that we're ultimately wanting and maybe feeling powerless or hopeless over. It's we are entering a time where your state of being is going to be your greatest asset and commodity, and your frequency is going to be the greatest currency. So we're shifting into a totally different realm of being. And so we get to reconfigure the way that we see things. We get to reprogram the software, you could say. And I don't like using this terminology, but it kind of is like that, because we are very programmable. So let's program ourselves in a way that is actually really supportive, and letting go of the old system, the inversion, the matrix, the patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, that has made you hustle and has made you feel that you are anything less than divine. So let's see where this conversation, where it spreads into and out of, and let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So let's dive straight into purpose, because I know a lot of people feel sometimes lost, confused, trying to figure out, well, what is my purpose? What is the meaning to being here? Why am I here? And the thing is that purpose has been conflated. It's been mumbled and jumbled into something that is very much within the old structure and paradigm of being, which is you must produce something. It must be on large scale. You must be famous, successful, make a lot of money, have a lot of followers. It's something that has to be this big, grand thing. And if you don't do that, then you're failing. If you don't reach all the markers that society or social media or the algorithm or whatever bullshit thing that society is pumping you with, you feel like you're failing. And on a more human level, maybe there is this feeling of like, well, I should be here for a reason. There should be a purpose, right? And people can feel the pressure, even their own internal pressure of, well, I don't know why I'm here. And, just to kind of put it into context, I was up in the middle of the night last night. And so I was watching one of these NDE videos because I find them so beautiful and inspiring, and they remind me of home. So I personally love them. Might not be your cup of tea, but I personally really, really love them. And, this man in his near-death experience on the other side, when he was coming back into his body, he had such a clear idea or sense, knowing, seeing of his purpose. So, so clear. And it was like, okay, I understand why I need to go back. And he had like glimpses of the future, of what would happen in the future, which he later described as like a real hyper surreal, real deja vu moment. But he said when he came back, it was like that purpose, he forgot it again. It wasn't clear. He's like, what was it? It was so clear when he was on the other side. And then he comes into his body and he's like, I can't remember it. And I find this very interesting because one of the biggest things that happens when we come into this incarnation is we forget, right? There's the amnesia. We forget who we truly are. We forget why we came here. And so sometimes life happens and challenge happens and suffering happens and shit happens. And you're like, what is going on? Why is this happening? Or why did my soul choose this? I know a lot of people, including myself at times, have gone, why would my life choose this particular path, this particular lesson? What am I learning here? In what ways am I trying to evolve through this? And especially if there's extended periods of suffering, that question of why can come in very strongly, because you're like, this sucks. Why would I actively choose this? On a side note, when we're on the other side and we're in that state of absolute wholeness, perfection, and perfection from the place of not ego, but perfection from divine perfection, right? Nothing is missing. We're not fragmented. We are connected to source. We are at home. Everything is unconditional love, which we primarily live in a paradigm of conditional love. Very rarely do we actually experience unconditional love. And that's one of the things that the NDErs say, is that the love will bring you to your knees and make you want to weep because it is so profound. The waves and waves of just unconditional love. You just couldn't imagine it. And I've touched into that in like silent meditation retreats, where the end of it with the collective energy of love is it's exquisite, like really ecstatic, it's so profound. So on that side, we're like, yeah, sure, sign me up for these things, like, divorce and illness and injury and tragedy and loss and grief. Like, sure, yeah, that sounds good. I'll learn through that. Like, it's like you're going in and taking a university course, you're getting a degree, and it sounds like the description sounds kind of interesting. Like, oh yeah, I'll get a lot of out of that, right? And then you come here and you forget, and you're kind of, I don't want to say separated, because that's the illusion, right? But you feel the disconnect. You forget your connection to source. You forget the connection even to your own soul, because they say that only a portion of your soul comes into your body. And actually, one of the things I so resonated with this man that I was listening to in the middle of the night when I was up, is when he was outside of his body, he's like, how am I going to fit all of this expansive, massive energy that is me, my soul, my spirit, and fit it into this teeny tiny little body? Like, how's that going to work? And when they land back in their body, there's this feeling of, oh, this is restrictive. And I think this is why I've always had kind of tics in my body, because it feels like the container is too small. And, that's another thing that we need to learn, how to just be able to expand beyond the borders of our body. But coming back to it, it's like the forgetting of all of these things and feeling like we're separate from it. And that is part of the game. The amnesia is part of the game. And how I've described it is the arc of life, as we come here forgetting. Through our forgetting, we learn all sorts of different lessons in this school of life, this school of being human and having emotions and conflict and feeling separate and all of these things. And then there's the remembrance. We remember our divinity through our humanity. And that arc of life gives us growth. It evolves our soul. It evolves our consciousness. It expands consciousness. It expands the experience of consciousness, right? Because every experience that we have, it's like adding to the library of consciousness. The library, you could call it the Akashic records of experience that the soul is going into, all sorts of different incarnations, right? And in all sorts of different realms. But to pull it back in, when we come, we forget. And so on that side, everything feels like, yes, I'll sign up for that. Yes, this is my purpose. It's really clear. And then we get here and we're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing. There's no manual. There's no guidance. Like, what's going on here, right? But I think it's designed that way, and I do think it's shifting. I think we are coming into a time where we'll be able to be in embodied incarnate form, but connected to who we truly are on the other side of the veil. But part of the forgetting and the re-remembering and trusting the process of just step by step by step is part of the evolution, is part of the growth, right? My mom sent me a really lovely video. Is probably from a long time ago. Elizabeth Gilbert. And the question was something around like, what would you tell your 15-year-old self? And, people get asked that question a lot of the times. And she's like, you know what? I would tell her, just keep on doing whatever you're going to do, which I will regret now, but like I became who I am because of the decisions that you made. And of course we could go back and we could perfect, we could perfect the memory. We could perfect, I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have married that person. But the thing is, we made the choice that we made in the moment without the future knowledge, right? Because that's what brought us through these series of experiences that have grown us. Right. And sometimes, there's struggle and suffering and it freaking hurts and there's pain and there's loss and there's grief and there's confusion and there's all these things, but it evolved us as a human and as a soul. And so there's absolute purpose and meaning to that. Right. So I think we need to trust that we are exactly where we're meant to be. And that we're making the best decisions that we could make in this moment, that we shouldn't go back and do it any differently. And because there's ultimately no right or wrong. With that said, there is always an opportunity to refine our choices. And by that, I mean, it's not about egoic perfection. It's actually about making the place from which we make choices in our lives one that is from heart, based in love and authenticity. And sometimes, we'll make the choices that are not authentic to us. They're not coming from love. They might be coming from fear. They might be coming from survival. They might be coming from insecurity. And there's something to learn from making those decisions, right? And then we get to a later point in our life where we go, you know what? I'm not going to make those decisions anymore based on insecurity and lack of self-worth and fear and making myself small, or whatever the story is, whatever the narrative and the set of beliefs that go with that narrative are. We eventually hopefully do get to that point of like, okay, what choice would I make if I was really in my authenticity? What choice would I make if I was really coming from a place of love and self-acceptance and self-worth, that I'm enough as I am? What is divine will, right? Like beyond free will, what is divine will? And can I trust and have faith in that and know that I am exactly where I need to be at every point, right? So I want to tie it back around to purpose. What I hear again and again and again listening to these NDErs, and I find this to be true for me more and more as I grow older. For me personally, I'll just share my personal vision from a very young age, like 4. I always had this sense that my purpose is to create a positive effect on humanity. But here's where the matrix paradigm, the patriarchal paradigm, the societal paradigm that we've been in comes in. It said to me, or how I took it, is you need to be a famous ballerina. You need to be a famous choreographer. You need to be a famous actress. You need to be a well-established coach. You need to be a famous author. Everything was around fame. It needed to be big. It needed to have thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of followers. And this is how you're going to affect the masses. It was like the pressure of it needs to be that, or else you failed your purpose. And I remember one of my dear friends that I've known for 15 years now, probably, At one point she said, Corinne, you have no idea the ripple effect that you have. Like, yes, maybe you don't feel like it's in front of the masses, but she's like, you have profoundly changed my life. And I show up differently with my friends, and they probably show up differently with their friends. And that is like the concentric circles, right? That's how we affect change, one person at a time. And we can't underestimate the power of that. So the thing that came through the most listening to these NDErs around purpose was be love. You're meant to be here and be the love that we so profoundly feel and are connected to on the other side. Call it God, call it source, call it creator, call it universe, call it consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The source of creation is that all loving, unconditional love, zero judgment state of being that is continually expanding in its consciousness and in its state of being of love. And so no matter what you do here, right, whatever the expression of doing is, the purpose is, how are you being? And are you being in a state of love? Because what I've heard again and again and again in someone's life review is they show you your life, but they don't just show you how you felt in an experience. They show you the consequence of your actions and how you made other people feel. And that's what all these NDEers say, woo, that was the hardest bit. Because if they ever caused pain to somebody else, they felt the pain of that person. And there's zero judgment. It's not like you're not being punished, you're not being berated, but you're learning from it. You're learning, okay, how can you show up with more love? How can you show up with more compassion, more heart, more generosity? One person said, like, we're learning to be God, but I'm very mindful of how that sounds, because it can sound, I think in this matrix, everything is inverted, right? So we think that when someone's trying to be God, and there are some pretty evil people on this planet trying to pretend like they're God, to control nature, to control humans, to control the food chain, to control the skies, you know what I mean? To control everything, but it's very malevolent. It's not benevolent. So I don't mean to be God in a controlling way, because that's not what God is, and we have a lot of conditioning around, you better behave or God is going to punish you or going to send you to hell. I vehemently do not agree with that. And listening to people's near-death experiences, and some of whom were very religious, brought up very, very religious. They were like, oh God, I was taught completely wrong. God would never punish. Like, hell is on earth, and you might slip through a realm of hell as you're passing through the veil, because it's just, again, the reflection of your own state of being. And what is it that you need to move through? What is it that you need to shed? What is it that you need to face? And unfortunately, we're surrounded in kind of a web of fear, which really pulls us away from our innate and true being. So what if you were to know that your purpose, how you express your purpose in what you do, whether you're a garbage man or a house cleaner or a CEO or a teacher or a secretary or a therapist or a writer or a healer or an artist or a dancer, or it does not matter. Are you embodying love? Are you kind? Are you generous of spirit? Do you smile at people? And part of this is doing the inner work and facing our shadow and embracing our fears, so that we show up more kindly and compassionately and lovingly with ourselves, so that then we can do that for others, right? It's very hard to do it for others if we can't even do it with ourselves. So there's absolutely a point to doing the inner work and doing the shadow work, and ultimately just understanding that judgment doesn't help anything or anyone, right? It's really coming to that place of, I accept myself for who I am, but I can take responsibility when I'm not shaming myself and judging and blaming myself. I can take self-responsibility and go, you know what? I can show up better. Not because I need to be a perfect human from an egoic perspective, but because I can be a better human, a good person from the perspective of the divine, which you are already that, but in human form, like we have all of these other things to contend with, right? So it takes a little bit more work and effort, but it evolves us. It's part of the school of life. It's part of the classroom. But just that is really the most important thing. I was driving back from dropping my daughter off this morning, and I don't know if this woman in the car, there was a little old couple in this tiny little smart car. It was so cute. It was really small. And they were taking a left turn, and I was there standing at the stop sign. And I don't know if she was looking at the car behind, or if there was a person behind me, or if she was looking at me but thought I was someone else. But she drove past and was just like smiling and waving. And it really made me smile. It was just like, whether that was meant for me or someone else, like I got to experience being on the end of that beautiful energy of just a smile and waving. And that's the thing. Those are the moments that matter. Those are the moments that, whatever you want to call it, God's source or your soul or your guides or your life review, you're going to look at and go, those were the moments that counted. Those were the moments that counted. There was like a little blockage in the road, and this older woman had stopped and was letting all these cars come by. And I chose to stop, and I waved her. I said, come, your turn now. And my daughter said, oh, that was really nice of you, Mama. It's things like that, which when we get so caught up in our lives and what we're doing and we're rushing, we need to get there and we need to do that and we need to fix this, and we forget the simple moments. And when we act from that place of kindness and generosity, and we slow down and we recognize that's another human, and they have their story and they have their plight and they have their feelings and they have their journey. But can I, for that moment, show up with a moment of acknowledgement? All these spiritual people are like, namaste, namaste, without understanding what the hell that actually means. Namaste means I bow down in reverence to the divinity within you. That's all nice and pretty when you're like in a yoga class and, you're like, Om Mani Padme Hum and, namaste. But if we're not integrating that into our lives and being kind with the people in the parking lot or at the supermarket, in the line, whatever, the person that's like kind of being a dick behind the screen at the post office, whatever. If our daily exchanges with other humans aren't imbued with love, and I'm not going to lie, sometimes like that's not so easy, right? Sometimes it's easy to get triggered. Sometimes people are really closed down and they're mean or they're grumpy or whatever, but it's like, continue to come back to heart, continue to come back to being that state of being of love. And what if that was enough as to what your purpose is here? What if it was enough that your purpose was to be an alchemist and to alchemize all of the fear and the stress and the wounding and the shadow and the conflict and the illusion of separation and all the other shades of gray in between, and alchemize it into love? Return it back to love, which is our natural state of being, which is our God state of being, our divine state of being, the source of who we truly are, what we're made of, right? How would your life change if like that would be enough? You don't need to go get millions of followers. You don't need to make $1 million. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to validate who you are by doing something that looks hugely successful or cool or that people buy into. Like, you get to just be your beautiful self. And I think we become more beautiful, like our soul shines through more, the more that we accept our humanity, the more that we let go of judging who we are, the more that we show up with like a gentleness and a softness and a kindness and a lovingness, like we would want the most nurturing of mothers to have been with us, right? And part of the unconditionality of source love is it doesn't matter what you've done. It will always love you. And some people will be like, well, if you do terrible things, you should be punished. There should be some repercussion. I don't want to say there will be repercussions in life, right? You will be in extreme pain. It's like when we're judgmental towards others, like if you notice it within yourself, like if I'm speaking in a way that is judgmental of someone or something, it will feel a bit yucky inside, right? It won't feel good. The moment, let's say I'm in, reacted in a certain way. Like my daughter is one of the most brilliant teachers for me, because it really is this mirror or this opportunity where you're just there. And especially because I'm a single mother, like we spend so much time with each other that, if I'm in a moment of kind of reacting a little bit, I'm in reaction rather than response, or even, this goes both ways. We both have learned, if like, oh, okay, wait a second, I'm going to take self-responsibility for that. And I'm going to say, you know what, I'm sorry, this is what was going on for me. Right. And get into the vulnerability, get into the truth of what was going on rather than just the surface and the reactivity around things. And when we take self-responsibility, it's like, oh, that feels good, because then it drops us into our heart. Right. And we're not trying to defend or, no, I didn't do that. No, I didn't say that. That's not what that doesn't feel good. And it's like interesting to watch my daughter going through an age where it kind of, there is a little bit of that. And it's like, no, just take responsibility. It's okay. That it's okay, but take responsibility, and then we can move on. We can come back to a place of harmony. So there's this thing that I've spoken to before of like really becoming spiritual adults rather than kind of, toddlers or at best adolescents that are still very reactive and not wanting to take self-responsibility and blaming and, pointing the finger and making someone else do the work. There is something that is incredibly empowering about becoming the spiritual adult that says, you know what, I can take self-responsibility for that. I can show up better, not because I'm not good enough, right? But because that's my true innate nature and I'm coming back home to it. So what if we were to take away the pressure of purpose? The pressure of needing to make something big in our lives in order for us to feel like, okay, I've done a good job at this life and I'm validated and I can be pleased with myself or whatever. Actually, it was this, not that I'm a fan. I'm not one for celebrities, but I caught a reel of Will Smith talking about how there's rock bottom and there's what he calls cliff top. And they're very similar. But cliff top is where you have everything that you possibly think you could ever have or want or desire as far as what society tells you should have and want. You could have all the money, you could have all the houses, all the nice clothes, all of the like holidays and this and that and the other. And you get to a point where you get everything. And then you're like, and then what? Like, that's it? And if you're not at peace with yourself, if you can't go inside and create that feeling of peace and harmony and love and enoughness, it will feel so empty. It will feel like that rock bottom where like you have nothing. Where it's like you have everything that, when you're on rock bottom or when you're in a low state, you go, if I had that, I'd be happy. If I had that, I'd be happy. Like when you have everything that you thought you would need to be happy and then you're not happy still. It's like, oh shit. Right. And so he calls that the cliff top because it can propel you equally into a state of being lost or being depressed. And so, the simplicity that I was speaking to in the beginning is we're coming into a time of it's less about the doing and it's more about the being. And the doing will come, but it will come from a very, very different place because it will be embodied. It will be authentic. It will be coming from a place of wholeness. It will be coming from a place of love. It will be an expression of the divine rather than I need this to make me whole. I need this to validate me. I need this to make me happy. I need this to fix me. I need this to make me feel safe, right? I talked about that a couple weeks ago, I think. It's a very different motivation. And I've used this saying before. I say it's less about the action and it's more about the motivation for that action. That changes everything. Right? You could have two people doing the same exact action, but if they have different motivations, they're going to feel totally different. Are you driven by insecurity or are you driven by generosity, for example? Right? Two very, very different energies and very different flavors, and therefore a very different result comes from the same action. So just tuning in. For myself, I no longer feel like, you know what, I need to do something really big that is going to get a lot of attention and followers. And I may or may write the book one day. I may or may not have loads of followers. Like, on this podcast, it might just still be like, a few hundred, whatever. It doesn't matter. I think for me, what the North Star is for me is be love. Show up with love. Show up with authenticity. Be true to myself so that I can be true with others. And by true, I mean like the universal truth of just isness that is based in love, right? So we're expanding beyond the egoic mind. And there's a place for ego, but it needs to be a healthy ego, right? But then we are more than that. We are not our ego. We are not our personality. We're not this body, right? So we're merging these two things. Yes, you are in human form and you are going to have the challenges and the pleasures of being human, but that we're calling in the remembrance of who we are so that we can be in incarnate form whilst also being strongly connected to and in the remembrance of who we truly, truly are. Which people that have crossed to the other side say, oh, it's that is so real. This is like the dream. This is like the dream, right? So let go of the pressure. Let go of the pressure that your purpose is something that you need to prove yourself by and through. That the greatest thing that we could ever do on this planet, in this life, in this incarnate form, is to be loving and kind and compassionate and generous and to truly be of service, but not giving to get fame, right? But genuinely, we're learning how to be the embodiment of divine essence. That's it, So don't berate yourself for the choices that you've made so far. Don't go into the shoulda, woulda, coulda. Don't go into regret, which we all do it. I've been there plenty of times and I've gotten emotional about it. Like, it's okay. We are where we are. We can always begin again, as my teacher, Jack Kornfield, used to say when I was in my 20s in California, going to his talks at Spirit Rock. You can always begin again. There's just only ever another now moment. And the simplification in a very overcomplicated, confusing, way too much information world, the simplification is just like come into your heart and be love. And what if that was your intention for every day? That whatever I do today, may I be a vessel for God's work, for divine love, for love itself. Whatever the right words or labels for you, choose those words for you because it has to resonate, right? But may I be a vessel for love. May love be imbued into every action that I take today. And it doesn't mean that you have to be holier than thou and perfect. Again, that's the egoic, even like the spiritual ego, right? That it's like, I need to be all Om Mani Padme Hum and super peaceful and zen and all perfect and kind and high, better than thou or whatever. That's what leads us into spiritual bypassing because we're trying to seek this perfection that it's like, no. You are already perfect. And you're also human, and being human is messy sometimes. And if it gets messy, then what you do get to do is you get to choose how you respond. You get to choose to take self-responsibility. You get to choose to evolve and become a quote unquote better person, which just means you get to be more of who you truly are, which is love. That's it. It's not adding on layers, it's stripping back layers and coming back home into who we've always been. So take the pressure off. Simple. Not always easy. Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple just means not complicated. We overcomplicate so much. It's very simple. The simplest things are the most profound. The most profound are always simple. So I'll leave it at that for now. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. Bye. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.